Rowing, often referred to as crew in the United States, is a sport with origins back to ancient Egyptian times. It is based on propelling a boat on water using oars. By pushing against the water with an oar, a force is generated to move the boat. The sport can be either recreational, where the focus is on learning the technique of rowing, or competitive, where athletes race against each other in boats. There are a number of different boat classes in which athletes compete, ranging from an individual shell to an 8-person shell with coxswain. Modern rowing as a competitive sport can be traced to the early 10th century when races were held between professional watermen on the River Thames. In London, United Kingdom, often prizes were offered by the London guilds and livery companies. Amateur competition began towards the end of the 18th century with the arrival of boat clubs at the British public schools of Eton College and Westminster School. Similarly, clubs were formed at the University of Oxford, with a race held between Brasenose College and Jesus College in 1815. At the University of Cambridge the first recorded races were in 1827. Public rowing clubs were beginning at the same time. In England, Leander Club was founded in 1818. In Germany, Der Hamburger und Germania Ruder Club was founded in 1836, and in the United States, Narragansett Boat Club was founded in 1838 and Detroit Boat Club was founded in 1839. In 1843, the first American college rowing club was formed at Yale University. The International Rowing Federation is responsible for international governance of rowing and was founded in 1892 to provide regulation at a time when the sport was gaining popularity. Across 6 continents there are now 148 countries with rowing federations that participate in the sport. Rowing is one of the oldest Olympic sports. It was on the program for the 1896 Games, but the rowing did not take place due to bad weather. It has been competed since 1900. Women's rowing was added to the Olympic program in 1976. Today, only 14 boat classes are raced at the Olympics, across men and women. Each year the World Rowing Championships is held by FISA with 22 boat classes raced. In Olympic years only the non-Olympic boat classes are raced at the World Championships. The European Rowing Championships are held annually, along with 3 World Rowing Cups in which each event earns a number of points for a country towards the World Cup title. Since 2008, rowing has also been competed at the Paralympic Games. Major domestic competitions take place in dominant rowing nations and include the boat race and Henley Royal Regatta in the United Kingdom, the Australian Rowing Championships in Australia, the Harvard-Yale Regatta and Head of the Charles Regatta in the United States, and Royal Canadian Henley Regatta in Canada. Many other competitions often exist for racing between clubs, schools, and universities in each nation. Basic information. While rowing, the athlete sits in the boat facing toward the stern, and uses the oars which are held in place by the oarlocks to propel the boat forward. This may be done on a canal, river, lake, sea, or other large bodies of water. The sport requires strong core balance, physical strength, flexibility, and cardiovascular endurance. Whilst the action of rowing and equipment used remains fairly consistent throughout the world, there are many different types of competition. These include endurance races, time trials, stake racing, bumps racing, and the side-by-side format used in the Olympic Games. The many different formats are a result of the long history of the sport, its development in different regions of the world, and specific local requirements and restrictions. There are 2 forms of rowing. In sweep or rowing, each rower has 1 oar, held with both hands. This is generally done in pairs, 4s and 8s. In some regions of the world, each rower in a sweep boat is referred to either as port or starboard, depending on which side of the boat the rower's oar extends to. In other regions, the port side is referred to as stroke side, and the starboard side as bow side. This applies even if the stroke oarsman is rowing on bow side or the bow oarsman on stroke side. In sculling, each rower has 2 oars, one in each hand. Sculling is usually done without a coxswain. In quads, doubles or singles, the oar in the sculler's right hand extends to port, and the oar in the left hand extends to starboard. Anatomy of a stroke. The rowing stroke may be characterized by 2 fundamental reference points: the catch, which is placement of the oar blade in the water, and the extraction, also known as the finish or release, when the rower removes the oar blade from the water. The action between catch and release is the first phase of the stroke that propels the boat. At the catch, the rower places the blade in the water and applies pressure to the oar by pushing the seat toward the bow of the boat by extending the legs, thus pushing the boat through the water. The point of placement of the blade in the water is a relatively fixed point about which the oar serves as a lever to propel the boat. As the rower's legs approach full extension, the rower pivots the torso toward the bow of the boat and then finally pulls the arms towards his or her chest. The hands meet the chest right above the diaphragm. At the end of the stroke, with the blade still in the water, the hands drop slightly to unload the oar so that spring energy stored in the bend of the oar gets transferred to the boat, which eases removing the oar from the water and minimizes energy wasted on lifting water above the surface. The recovery phase follows the drive. The recovery starts with the extraction and involves coordinating the body movements with the goal to move the oar back to the catch position. In extraction, the rower pushes down on the oar handle to quickly lift the blade from the water and rapidly rotates the oar so that the blade is parallel to the water. This process is sometimes referred to as feathering the blade. Simultaneously, the rower pushes the oar handle away from the chest. The blade emerges from the water square and feathers immediately once clear of the water. After feathering and extending the arms, the rower pivots the body forward. Once the hands are past the knees, the rower compresses the legs, which moves the seat towards the stern of the boat. The leg compression occurs relatively slowly compared to the rest of the stroke, which affords the rower a moment to recover, and allows the boat to glide through the water. The gliding of the boat through the water during recovery is often called run. A controlled slide is necessary to maintain momentum and achieve optimal boat run. However, various teaching methods disagree about the optimal relation in timing between drive and recovery. Near the end of the recovery, the rower squares the blade into perpendicular orientation with respect to the water and begins another stroke. Breathing during a rowing stroke. There are 2 schools of thought with respect to the appropriate breathing technique during the rowing motion: full lungs at the catch and empty lungs at the catch. With the full lung technique, rowers exhale during the stroke and inhale during the recovery. In labored circumstances, rowers will take a quick punt at the end of the stroke before taking a deep breath on the recovery that fills the lungs by the time the catch is reached. In the empty lung technique, rowers inhale during the drive and exhale during the recovery so that they have empty lungs at the catch, because the knees come up to the chest when the lungs are empty. This technique allows the rower to reach a little bit further than if the lungs were full of air. Full lungs at the release also can help the rower to maintain a straighter back, a style encouraged by many coaches. A scientific study of the benefits of untrained breathing technique in relatively fit, but untrained rowers did not show any physiological or psychological benefit to either technique. Rowing propulsion. Rowing is a cyclic form of propulsion such that in the quasi-steady state the motion of the system is repeated regularly, in order to maintain the steady-state propulsion of the system without either accelerating or decelerating the system. The sum of all the external forces on the system, averaged over the cycle, must be zero. Thus, the average drag force on the system must equal the average propulsion force on the system. The drag forces consist of aerodynamic drag on the superstructure of the system, as well as the hydrodynamic drag on the submerged portion of the system. The propulsion forces of the forward reaction of the water on the oars while in the water. Note also that the oar can be used to provide a drag force when the system is brought to rest. Although the oar can be conveniently thought of as a lever with a fixed pivot point in the water, the blade moves sideways and sternwards through the water, so that the magnitude of the propulsion force developed is the result of a complex interaction between unsteady fluid mechanics and solid mechanics and dynamics. Distinction from other watercraft. The distinction between rowing and other forms of water transport, such as canoeing or kayaking, is that in rowing the oars are held in place at a pivot point that is in a fixed position relative to the boat. This point is the load point for the oar to act as a second-class lever. In flat water rowing, the boat is narrow to avoid drag, and the oars are attached to oarlocks at the end of outriggers extending from the sides of the boat. Racing boats also have sliding seats to allow the use of the legs in addition to the body to apply power to the oar. Racing shells are inherently unstable, much like racing kayaks or canoes. The rowing boats require oars on either side to prevent them from rolling over. Fitness and health. Rowing is one of the few non-weight-bearing sports that exercises all the major muscle groups, including quads, biceps, triceps, lats, glutes and abdominal muscles. In fact, racing a 2K is as physically demanding as playing 2 basketball games back-to-back. The sport also improves cardiovascular endurance and muscular strength. High-performance rowers tend to be tall and muscular. Although extra weight does increase the drag on the boat, the larger athletes' increased power tends to be more significant. The increased power is achieved through increased length of leverage on the oar through longer limbs of the athlete. In multi-person boats, the lightest person typically rows in the bow seat at the front of the boat. Rowing is a low-impact activity with movement only in defined ranges, so twist and sprain injuries are rare. However, the repetitive rowing action can put strain on knee joints, the spine and the tendons of the forearm, and inflammation of these are the most common rowing injuries. If one rows with poor technique, especially rowing with a curved rather than straight back, other injuries may surface, including back pains. Blisters occur for almost all rowers, especially in the beginning of one's rowing career, as every stroke puts pressure on the hands. Though rowing frequently tends to harden hands and generate protective calluses, holding the oars too tightly or making adjustments to technique may cause recurring and new blisters, as it is common to feather the blade. Another common injury is getting track bites, thin cuts on the back of one's calf or thigh caused by contact with the seat tracks at either end of the stroke. History. Even since the earliest recorded references to rowing, the sporting element has been present. An Egyptian funerary inscription of 1430 BC records that the warrior Amenhotep II was also renowned for his feats of oarsmanship. In the Aeneid, Virgil mentions rowing forming part of the funeral games arranged by Aeneas in honor of his father. In the 13th century, Venetian festivals called regatta included boat races among others. The first known, modern, rowing races began from competition among the professional watermen in the United Kingdom that provided ferry and taxi service on the River Thames in London. Prizes for wager races were often offered by the London guilds and livery companies or wealthy owners of riverside houses. The oldest surviving such race, Doggett's Coat and Badge, was first contested in 1715 and is still held annually from London Bridge to Chelsea. During the 19th century, these races were to become numerous and popular, attracting large crowds. Prize matches amongst professionals similarly became popular on other rivers throughout Great Britain in the 19th century, notably on the Tyne. In America, the earliest known race dates back to 1756 in New York, when a Pettiaga defeated a Cape Cod whaleboat in a race. Amateur competition in England began towards the end of the 18th century. Documentary evidence from this period is sparse, but it is known that the Monarch Boat Club of Eton College and the Isis Club of Westminster School were both in existence in the 1790s. The Star Club and Arrow Club in London for gentlemen amateurs were also in existence before 1800. At the University of Oxford, bumping races were first organised in 1815 when Brasenose College and Jesus College boat clubs had the first annual race, while at Cambridge the first recorded races were in 1827. Brasenose beat Jesus to win Oxford University's first Head of the River. The two clubs claim to be the oldest established boat clubs in the world. The boat race between Oxford University and Cambridge University first took place in 1829, and was the second intercollegiate sporting event. The interest in the first boat race and subsequent matches led the town of Henley-on-Thames to begin hosting an annual regatta in 1839. Founded in 1818, Leander Club is the world's oldest public rowing club. The second oldest club which still exists is the Der Hamburger und Germania Ruder Club, which was founded 1836 and marked the beginning of rowing as an organized sport in Germany. During the 19th century, as in England, wager matches in North America between professionals became very popular, attracting vast crowds. Narragansett Boat Club was founded in 1838 exclusively for rowing. During an 1837 parade in Providence, a group of boatinmen were pulling a longboat on wheels, which carried the oldest living survivor of the 1772 Gaspee raid. They boasted to the crowd that they were the fastest rowing crew on the bay. A group of Providence locals took issue with this and challenged them to race, which the Providence group summarily won. The six-man core of that group went on the following year to found NBC in 1838. Detroit Boat Club was founded in 1839 and is the second oldest continuously operated rowing club in the U.S. In 1843, the first American college rowing club was formed at Yale University. The Harvard-Yale Regatta is the oldest intercollegiate sporting event in the United States. http Rowing History. Net time %20 line TL %20-1849 images. HTM having been contested every year since 1852. FISA, the sport's governing body, is formally known as the Fédération Internationale des Associations Équestres d'Aviron, though, the majority of the time, either the initialism FISA or the English co-name World Rowing, which the organization uses for commercial purposes, is used to refer to it. Founded by representatives from France, Switzerland, Belgique, Adriatica, and Italy in Turin on 25 June 1892. FISA is the oldest international sports federation in the Olympic movement. FISA first organized the European Rowing Championships in 1893. An annual World Rowing Championships was introduced in 1962. Rowing has also been conducted at the Olympic Games since 1900. Equipment. Racing boats are long, narrow, and broadly semicircular in cross-section in order to reduce drag to a minimum. There is some trade-off between boat speed and stability in choice of hull shape. They usually have a fin towards the rear to help prevent roll and yaw and to increase the effectiveness of the rudder. Originally made from wood, shells are now almost always made from a composite material for strength and weight advantages. FISA rules specify minimum weights for each class of boat so that no individual team will gain a great advantage from the use of expensive materials or technology. There are several different types of boats. They are classified using number of rowers. In all forms of modern competition, the number is either 1, 2, 4, or 8. Position of coxswain. Boats are either coxless, bow-coxed, or stern-coxed. Although sculling and sweep boats are generally identical to each other, they are referred to using different names. Sweep, coxless pair, coxed pair, coxless 4, coxed 4, 8. Sculling, single scull, double scull, triple scull, quad scull, octuple scull. Sweep, sculling, queep, 2 scullers and 2 sweepers. Randon, 1 sculler and 2 sweepers. With the smaller boats, specialist versions of the shells for sculling can be made lighter. The riggers in sculling apply the forces symmetrically to each side of the boat, whereas in sweep-oared racing these forces are staggered alternately along the boat. The sweep-oared boat has to be stiffer to handle these unmatched forces, so consequently requires more bracing and is usually heavier. A pair is usually a more robust boat than a double scull, for example, and being heavier is also slower when used as a double scull. In theory, this could also apply to the 4X and 8X, but most rowing clubs cannot afford to have a dedicated large hull which might be rarely used and instead generally opt for versatility in their fleet by using stronger shells which can be rigged for either sweep rowing or sculling. The symmetrical forces also make sculling more efficient than rowing. The double scull is faster than the coxless pair, and the quadruple scull is faster than the coxless 4. One additional boat is the queep, a coxed or non-coxed shell. The bow and stroke positions have a set of sculling riggers and 2 and 3 have a sweep set. These shells have been used in the UK and recently at a club in Victoria, BC, Canada. In addition to the queep, the trop and the cox trop have become more mainstream. They are mainly rowed in central Canada. The trop shell consists of 3 people where the bow has a pair of sculling oars, and 2, 3 each a sweeping oar. A cox trop is the same configuration as the trop plus a cox seated at the stern of the boat. Many adjustments can be made to the equipment to accommodate the physiques of the crew. Collectively, these adjustments are known as the boat's rigging. Steering single, double, and quad sculls are usually steered by the scullers pulling harder on one side or the other. In other boats, there is a rudder, controlled by the coxswain, if present, or by one of the crew. In the latter case, the rudder cable is attached to the toe of one of his shoes which can pivot about the ball of the foot, moving the cable left or right. The bowman may steer since he has the best vision when looking over his shoulder. On straighter courses, the strokesman may steer since he can point the stern of the boat at some landmark at the start of the course. On international courses, landmarks for the steersman, consisting of 2 aligned poles, may be provided. Oars are used to propel the boat. They are long poles with one flat end about 50 centimeters long and 25 centimeters wide, called the blade. Classic oars were made out of wood, but modern oars are made from more expensive and durable synthetic material, the most common being carbon fiber. An oar is often referred to as a blade in the case of sweep or rowing and as a scull in the case of sculling. A sculling oar is shorter and has a smaller blade area than the equivalent sweep oar. The combined blade area of a pair of sculls is however greater than that of a single sweep oar, so the oarsman when sculling is working against more water than when rowing sweep oared. He is able to do this because the body action in sculling is more anatomically efficient. The spoon of oars is normally painted with the colors of the club to which they belong. This greatly simplifies identification of boats at a distance. As many sports teams have logos printed on their jerseys, rowing clubs have specifically painted blades that each team is associated with. Indoor rowing. Indoor rowing is a way to train technique and strength by going through the same motions as rowing, with resistance. Indoor rowing is helpful when there are no rowable bodies of water nearby, or where the conditions don't permit rowing. Rowing tank. A rowing tank is an indoor facility which attempts to mimic the conditions rowers face on open water. Rowing tanks are primarily used for off-season rowing, muscle-specific conditioning and technique training, or simply when bad weather doesn't allow for open water training. Ergometer rowing machines simulate the rowing action and provide a means of training on land when waterborne training is restricted, and of measuring rowing fitness. Ergometers do not simulate the lateral balance challenges, the exact resistance of water, or the exact motions of true rowing including the sweep of the oar handles. For that reason ergometer scores are generally not used as the sole selection criterion for crews, and technique training is limited to the basic body position and movements. However, this action can still allow a comparable workout to those experienced on the water. Sometimes, slides are placed underneath the erg to try to simulate the movement of being on the water. It allows the machine to move back and forth smoothly as if there is water beneath you. The slides can be connected in rows or columns so that rowers are forced to move together on the ergometer, similar to how they would match up the rhythm in a boat. Indoor rowing has become popular as a sport in its own right, with numerous indoor competitions during the winter off-season. Damage. The most commonly damaged piece of rowing equipment is the skeg, which is a metal or plastic fin that comes out of the bottom of the boat to help maintain stability, and to assist in steering. Since the skeg sticks out below the hull of the boat, it is the most vulnerable to damage. However, it is relatively easy to replace skegs by gluing a new one on. Hull damage is also a significant concern both for maintaining equipment and for rower safety. Hull damage can be caused by submerged logs, poor strapping to trailers, and collisions with other boats, docks, rocks, etc. Transportation boats are conveyed to competitions on special trailers accommodating up to 20 boats. Boat storage, boat houses, and boat centers. Racing boats are stored in boat houses. These are specially designed storage areas which usually consist of a long two-story building with a large door at one end which leads out to a pontoon or slipway on the river or lakeside. The boats are stored on racks on the ground floor. Oars, riggers, and other equipment is stored around the boats. Boat houses are typically associated with rowing clubs and include some social facilities on the upper floor, a cafe, bar, or gym. Boat centers are commonly built along river banks in major U.S. cities. The Thompson Boat Center, managed by the U.S. National Park Service, is used as a home base for high school and adult teams in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Regattas are frequently held at TBC through the spring, summer, and fall.